Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to Angelic Embrace, where we document and narrate the glorious and life-changing near-death experiences from people all over the world. So sit back, relax, know that you are loved, and let's get into today's near-death experience story. Consider subscribing and watching to the end to find out what happens. It is a very long narrative, but after hearing so many other accounts that are strikingly similar to mine, I assume that I will eventually be forced to put it all down. In the meanwhile, to summarize, it has taken me from the age of 17 to the age of 50 to put everything into perspective with a little assistance from books of all religions, articles, and the internet. Of these, the internet has been the most helpful in making me realize that I am not alone. At the age of 17, I gave birth. I know, a little young, but I had eclampsia, which caused complications. This was the first time I encountered another dimension. I was unable to take a breath. In any case, I remember waking up in the hospital with a terrible thirst, and the nurse bringing me water. It was like drinking the essence of life. I told the nurse that I didn't have any fear of passing away. She inquired as to the reason, and I informed her that I had been away at another location. I attempted to describe it, but I couldn't find the right words. But when I thought about it, I recalled that I was in a gray room with other individuals in it. The place gave off the impression of being a waiting area. People were approaching me one by one. Some of them seemed like they may have been family, but I was unfamiliar with them. But they were familiar with me. I can still vividly recall the great sensation of love and warmth, as well as honesty and care. There was a sense of completeness that was not conditional, and I want to be with these individuals permanently. There was a type of telepathic understanding, thus no words were said between the two of them. The utmost vital information that they imparted upon me was that I needed to return. I argued with them and tried to persuade them. However, they demanded that I go back since I had work to do, and I simply couldn't bring myself to do it. I just couldn't bear the idea of leaving this sense of perfect love and warmth. After that, I suddenly found myself back in my body, experiencing all of the agony and anguish that comes along with giving birth. This occurred in 1969. After that, I had a lot of other spiritual experiences. We went to parties at the time because we were young, had a young spouse, and other youthful friends. At one of the parties I hosted at my house, someone brought cakes, but these were not your typical cakes. Whatever was in mine, I was laughing 1 minute, and the next, a figure dressed in a cloak and hood was talking to me. Well, whatever was in mine, I was laughing. He had a beard of silvery gray. I can clearly recall that despite his kind demeanor, he was interrogating me. After that, I noticed an image that was in front of me. It was a recurring theme. I took a close look at this design, which was woven into a tapestry. Both the warp and the weft were visible to me. It was me that created this pattern. It made me feel it. I was encouraged to take a closer look by the bearded man. I could see myself in a situation for my life as I zoomed in closer and closer to every color thread. I was viewing myself in a situation from the past, and each scenario showed me how the other individuals involved were affected by the choices I had made. I started to realize how many instances there were in which I had been self-centered, greedy, cruel, calculating, and careless, and as a result, I started to feel utterly humiliated. It was an overpowering sensation of regret for the way that I had behaved toward other people. The compassionate men then took me out of my sorrow and said, "Hey, it's not all awful." After that, we went to other portions of the pattern, and other events played out like they were in a film. I viewed the scenes when I thought it was appropriate to do so. I had been pleasant, helpful, loving, and amusing, along with all the other wonderful things that let me feel like it wasn't such a terrible situation. Then he turned the tapestry over and showed me the reverse side. There were several strands that were hanging free, giving it an unkempt appearance. When I brought this to his attention, he responded by saying, "That's because it's not completed yet." When I came to, I was under the impression that I had been gone for several days, but in reality, it was probably no more than a few minutes. This happened when I was 18 years old. I have now figured out what the tapestry of life means. Other experiences came to me, and right from the start, I got the feeling that I was talking to Jesus or someone else. I had an innate feeling that they were present. Despite this, as I was going through this process, I kept telling myself that it was all a dream, that I had a vivid and colorful imagination, and that I was crazy. There were times when I questioned whether or not this was actually happening. When things were very difficult, that was about the only time I would verbally communicate with Jesus. I discovered that prayer was quite effective. I learned the hard way to watch what I ask for when I pray. My prayers were heard, but the answers they brought were not in the form that I had anticipated receiving them. There are things to take away from this experience, and some of them are rather challenging. I came upon a book with the title The Tao of Physics. As I flipped through it, I noticed a type of pattern that the author referred to as the dance of Shiva, and I knew that I had no choice but to purchase it. When I read about something that I have done or seen in the past, I almost always receive a sensation of calm contentment and validation. The knowledge that comes through dancing the Shiva dance is that nothing in life is ever lost or squandered. I observed energy bouncing about in all directions, interacting with one another, and then bouncing off. The momentum was quickly shifting toward the newly opened attractions. It was constructing, expanding, and eventually exploding, and then it flew off to begin again, with nothing wasted and always movement. When I saw this for the first time, I realized how critically vital each of us is. We are all a part of something very amazing, and there is a strategy behind everything that is happening. When I was in my 30s is when I had the most recent of these experiences. In spite of the fact that it was not the last revelation, it was the most magnificent. My mood wasn't really upbeat. I had the impression that I had gotten things all messed up. I had the impression that I was acting inappropriately, and in point of fact, I was under the impression that I was acting inappropriately. I just couldn't shake the notion that kept popping into my head, "You have work to do." If I had realized how much work was waiting for me on the other side, I would have insisted on staying there and stomped my foot to show my determination. It did not appear that I was performing the sort of job that they desired for me to perform. After my most recent insight, there were times when I spoke to individuals and found myself saying things to them that left them gaping open-mouthed. My first thought would be, where did they learn these words? In any case, I was not really pleased with myself and I had a frantic feeling, so I did something that is not something that I often do. I went to the church in the nearest village. It was the Friday before Good Friday, and I was filled with gloom. There were lights, robes, and a procession that was heading in the direction of the vicar. A small taste of wine and a piece of what appeared to be rice paper were being distributed by him. The most of the ceremony was spent with me in tears, and I merely finished what I started. I got in line to be blessed and then took the gifts that were offered to me. Since then, I've learned that this is something I shouldn't have done because I've never been confirmed in this particular church. But, isn't it true that Jesus loves me? I had no idea what was going on. It was the Monday after Easter. At some ungodly hour in the morning, I shot straight up in bed. My hubby inquired as to what the issue was with me. I screamed, "Jesus, I've seen Jesus." He told her to go back to sleep and that it's just a dream. I cannot in good conscience concede that this was only a dream. I saw the light that was the brightest. My whole field of vision was illuminated by what seemed to be an atomic light, although it did not irritate my eyes in any way. I felt my heart racing. There was a being located right in the center of this light. He was dressed in a white robe and stood there. I read this description later in the Bible, but this was what I saw. His hair was rather long. When I looked at the tie that he was wearing around his waist, I noticed that each end had a tassel on it. But what stands out the most to me are his feet. Stone or marble was used in their construction, and they looked absolutely stunning fashioned into sandals. Just glancing at his feet made me feel like a speck of sand or dust. I couldn't believe how little I was. After that, he conversed with me. I have no recollection of the words that he said. All I can recall is the sound that he created, which was like to being in the midst of an earthquake. Again, I don't think it was necessary for speech to be rumbling or deep. Although he acknowledged my presence and made it clear that he was aware of who I was, I just woke up because I was so terrified and amazed by what he had done. He did not give off the impression that he was very happy with me. Therefore, whether in my dreams or in reality, I am able to communicate with Jesus. Here is another one of our accounts of near-death experiences. My name is Yulanthi M, and during my life, my mind has bestowed and passed on a great deal of information to me. After I departed my body in 1988, while the horse was standing on my head, I only remember being in light and ascending. I didn't feel any discomfort, therefore I was able to leave my body and brain down there. It is the mentality of every individual that does move on. I have learned how to utilize my mind to help other people, how to use my energy, and how to be in command of my mind and not let anybody else dominate it. I am an independent thinker who is not bound by any one religious belief system. To put it simply, that is how I am. To believe in God is to damn oneself to hell, for when I did so, I was subjected to deceptions by those who desired and attempted to exert power over me. To be a free thinker means to enjoy life, to make the most of every opportunity, and to have unconditional love for all people. If I continue to adhere to my beliefs, I would not be tolerant of everyone that is living, even those that exist in other dimensions. The capacity for belief is limited. The cycle of life continues, and I have no doubt that my grandfather, who is no longer physically here, will one day become my grandchild. As a free thinker, he made his own decision. I was my great-grandma, but I stayed with my daughter, who is my grandmother, because I wanted to be with her. I will always maintain my status as a free thinker. That wraps up this extremely condensed introduction. When I got to the peak of the ray of light, I was halted by a person who questioned whether or not I believed in God. After giving a yes response, I was forced to walk away from the light and enter a passageway that led to a vast expanse of blue. There, I did see my grandma, who appeared to be quite distressed to see me there, and she reassured me that my father would take care of me. When I was 1 year old, I had a vision of my father sailing an ancient boat with my older brother Eric, who passed away when he was just 6 years old. Although I was there for a considerable amount of time, I was not inside the boat. My father inquired as to whether or not I intended to return home. I did not have time to respond to him, but I found myself sitting on the bed of my daughter, who was 10 years old at the time. I tried to comfort her by giving her a hug, kissing her, telling her I loved her and that I was happy, but she did not see me or feel me despite her cries of "Mom, don't die," or things to that effect. The exact same thing happened with my kid, who was 14 years old at the time. I was beyond angry, and Dad saw it, so I returned home, where I discovered that my children did, in fact, radiate a light, whilst my husband was dressed in dark. Then, while I was making my way back, I ran across Richard C., who advised me to listen to his music in order to get my health back. When I woke up, my father was referring to my mother as Carla, and my brother's girlfriend Frances was being referred to as Peggy. I did not have any of my own memories. Although I was familiar with my son, whose name was Daniel, I was not familiar with my daughter. Although I had any formal training in architecture, I was always in charge of my father's drawing projects because he was such a talented architect. Even though he is occasionally right by me and a part of me when I need it for some reason, it took me a long time to adjust to being myself again and letting go of Dad. It took me a long time to let go of Dad. My grandma was a talented artist who drew pictures of well-known figures like judges and other officials. She painted the figures' faces, but the hands were her favorite part. It's no surprise the hands looked like something out of a horror movie. My artwork does not depict how people appear on the surface, rather, it depicts how they are on the inside, and some of them do not like what they see at all. I am aware that there are a great number of other artists who operate in the same manner. Consequently, Those individuals have a responsibility to assist all of the people whom they have wronged in the past in order to achieve mental clarity. This will also allow them to demonstrate to artists how optimistic they can be. For me, writing is just a means of thought transmission. When a person is naturally poetic, poetry just flows out of them.